is unjust and what I think need to do to, change it. So, what is criminal justice? Criminal justice is the delivery of justice to those who have committed crime. So, you have those in different states who commit crimes: rape, burglary, assault and battery, robbery. All these things we call crime, right? So the system is a series of government agencies who have the goals to rehabilitate people who have done those crimes, to prevent those crimes from happening again, and basically be there for the victims, because we know they are criminals, but they're still humans, and the victims, they need help. So once you go through these traumatic incidents or whatever, you need the system to be there for you, right? The primary institutions of the criminal justice system are the police, prosecution and defense lawyers, the courts, and prisons. Those are like the most general, you know, people, institutions of the system. So, next, okay, I'll be talking about the components of the criminal justice system. So, you have law enforcement, the courts, and corrections, the three main components. So, the law enforcement officers take reports when a crime is observed. So, these are the officers that come to the scene or gather evidence. They have to build the case. We have officers who are appointed into particular areas, and they watch out for those areas to observe the crime in those areas. Um, Officers are also entitled to arrest the people who do the crime, so the offenders, give testimonies during the court process, and continue the investigation. Next, we have the courts. The role of the courts is to oversee the trial. So once um, the crime is done and the whole process happens, the trial is next. Not next, like you know what I'm saying, but it's the next thing. So the courts are run by the judges, and they make sure that the law is being followed during these trials. They accept or reject the plea agreements and set a date for sentencing for the offender. Lastly, is corrections. This is the main impact of the component. So it's like the punishment, so they can correct what the offender has done. So the correction officers supervise the offenders when they're in jail or prison, or out in the community. Those three different aspects: jail, prison, community. They could prepare an extensive report on offenders' behavior to help judges decide if sentences. So should the sentence be longer, or should we shorten it? Should you get parole? It's all these questions we have, right? Right. So one of the tasks for this presentation was to list some of the injustices of which system you picked. And this one is excessive mandatory minimum sentences. So, police usually do the stop and frisk or broken window policy. This idea usually targets minority and low income neighborhoods, and mandatory minimum punishments for victim crimes are disproportionately directed at people living in poverty. Next, women are frequently coerced under the threat of mandatory minimum sentences and to testify against their loved ones in exchange for a plea bargain. We see this a lot. And those who are unable to provide the information on family members, they are sent to prison for decades. Because of mandatory minimum sentences, innocent women spend far too long in prison. Next, we have discrimination. Okay. African Americans, especially our males, so I want everybody to pay attention to this first point. They are sentenced longer and harsher sentences. The court system that we have, they do have the tendency to judge and throw every single black man who walks in the courtroom, no matter what the case is, behind bars. That's just how it is. Discrimination. Next, there are Americans serving life sentences for nonviolent drug possession crimes. So life sentences for crimes where the victim was himself. My question here is: isn't our taxpayer money better spent on getting these people into substance abuse treatment where we can help them? That was one of my main questions. But instead, we throw them behind bars and they have little to no chance of getting a job. Right? So once they get out, how can they find a decent place to live? Hmm? So instead, they might go right back to what they was doing in the beginning. So these chances are also significantly decreased if you are white. Third, two individuals who do the same crime can receive two completely different sentences. I personally think that that is absolutely unjust. It shouldn't matter where you live or what color skin you have. So if I, a white 20-year-old female, walk into a gas station in Fargo, North Dakota and rob the place, I should get the same sentence as the 50-year-old male age in Chicago who commit the same crime. But as we all know, it is not that easy. Everybody does not have that logic. The system does not work in their favor. It's always biased. It's always going to be some reading between the lines or going between the books, should I say. So I'm saying that by saying not actually following the law, but making it up as you go. So, yeah, discrimination. The last one I chose was money bail. So we currently have two systems, one for the rich and the other for everybody else. So for hundreds of thousands of arrestees every year, the difference between freedom and jail depends solely on wealth status. So, we all know the term, somebody need to come bail me out. Yeah. A wealthy person can buy their pretrial freedom, keep their job, and live at home while preparing their defense. An arrestee who is poor must stay in jail for days, weeks, months, or years until their case resolves. Those detained prior to trial are more likely to lose their job, get evicted from their houses, and be unable to care for dependent relatives. So the money bail system does not promote liberty, public safety, or co-occurrence rates. All these goals can be better achieved through other means, and needless pretrial detention actually increases crime rates. So money bag, oh Lord, money bail is a price tag on freedom that only serves as wealth-based discrimination. That is true. So if you don't have the money to, don't have people who have the money to bail you out, then what do? Mm-hmm. You're stuck in jail, right? Compared to somebody who comes from a wealthy family, you make one call to your aunt or your wife or whatever, and they're up there 10 minutes with the money and you're out. And now you get to prepare and, keep your job and do all this while the other person who did the exact same thing as you had to stay in jail because of the money, right? Money bail. What would justice look like? I chose the three things: support of passage laws that reduce overly harsh sentences. So we have people here serving life for non-violent drug offenses or for certain felonies under habitat offender laws, which I feel as if those sentences are unnecessary. And they often fall on the backs of poor and people of color. Yeah, so it always seems to take the turn back to how African Americans are discriminated against, So that is one way how I see justice will look. The next thing would be end the death penalty. The death penalty is racist, expensive, and outdated. So while white victims appear to matter the most, and black defendants and black victims appear to matter the least. Not only is the death penalty discriminatory, but it's also expensive. The last thing would be to hold prosecutors and police responsible for deliberate misconduct. So police and prosecutors who deliberately engage in misconduct are rarely held liable for their actions. And this specific one, I was talking about how the conduct of police and prosecutors can land somebody innocent in jail. And I know if you are found innocent afterward, they give you money. but money cannot account for time, you know? So we have people who hide and destroy evidence that could clearly clear the accused of charges, or they fabricate evidence to make the defendant appear guilty, or rely on a testimony that is known to be false, or obtain it and using coerced confessions. All these things are unjust. All of them. Next, how can I have to call? So after college, I plan on being a part of the police force, and I feel as if police officers play a huge role in why the system is unjust. Hence, I go back to one of the main, parts of law enforcement. One way I figured that I would be able to help this cause is to consider return to community policing. It might not seem big, but it low key is. If the police personally know the folks they are tasked to serve, then they get a sense of who lives in the neighborhood, who is dealing drugs, and who is going to school. With knowledge comes trust. Now, I know sometimes people might do some sketchy things and deter off the path that you thought they was, sorry guys, a great person or wouldn't do a crime. But I'm just saying, with knowledge, police are better able to make informed life and death split-second decisions. Lastly, the criminal justice system in America was created to keep communities safe, to respect and restore victims, and to return offenders who leave prison to be self-sufficient and law-abiding. What the system has become is a monumental failure. Sorry, guys. This is screen recording. What the system has become is a monumental failure that our states and nation can no longer afford, and this is why we need the system to work the way it was designed, because it's going in a totally opposite, direction than what it was designed for, to help and rehabilitate and save people, and these things. It's looking like it's man-made now, and it's not working in anyone's favor but the wealthy. And I'm just sad to say that, but it's true. Now, before I end this, another part of the assignment was to kind of piggyback personally on where you're from or where you're living at, and talk about your project there. So I am from Chicago, Illinois, and the criminal justice system in this city is corrupt. And one of the main things we see is offenders who do drug possession get years in life and all these things in prison for drugs, compared to somebody who murdered or did a homicide and only get 5 years. That's just, that's not adding up. And we have a lot of people, especially black men, who are incarcerated for drug possession and have years in front of them in prison for just that. So I think that's a big thing that needs to be changed. And that's all I have for you today.